beautiful place to live. Adult-oriented luxury condominiums in downtown Maple Ridge. A short walk to the big new
We'll just go through this
complex and shopping malls. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, even satellite TV. Priced from only $58,500, and you automatically qualify for the free $3,000 federal grant. Choose yours right away. They're going fast. Open 2 to 7 daily. Phone 467-1436.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. At least one social credit backbencher who, for the purposes of this program, is going to remain nameless, wants to clip the wings of the Ombudsman, reduce him to the Ombudsman himself and maybe a couple of secretaries, on the somewhat specious and fallacious grounds that MLAs can do the work of the Ombudsman. Believe you me, there is not one MLA whom I know of, even with the Ombudsman's staff, who would stand up to and investigate matters on the part of the public with the panache and the skill of Carl Friedman. When he came here at first a few years back, I thought, who is this guy? Coming out to British Columbia, knows nothing about the country, a fellow from Alberta. He can't be a good ombudsman. Let me say quite bluntly that I have been more than impressed by the perspicacity, the stubbornness, and the directness with which, as an ombudsman should, he has tackled the government, laid it on the line, and submitted reports, embarrassing whomsoever, whenever it was necessary. That's my position, and I make no bones about it. But by sheer happy coincidence, the Ombudsman, yesterday I think it was, tabled a report in the House which shows precisely the need for an ombudsman. Not just for the problems of little people being messed about by the bureaucracy, but for the problems of industry. And he has turned up a case which on the face of it shows that it could well be that the people of British Columbia are being done out of millions of dollars in revenue from its forests because of the inability of the system to count the logs. And we're going to talk particularly this morning about what is known as the Shoal Island caper, where a logging company, an independent, went to the Ombudsman and said, hey, I'm getting done. They're not scaling the logs properly. And we'll get the Ombudsman's report, public and straight up, on that from Carl Friedman himself. We've done a fair amount on logging and the logging industry this week, and it's not merely by happenstance. First, we're told that in the next decade we can lose 68,000 jobs because of the decay of our forest in British Columbia. Then later on we dealt with Adam Zimmerman of Noranda on the problems facing the industry. Well, now this morning is going to be the chance, also as well as Carl Friedman, of the little people. I have 2 men here from the BC Independent Logging Association, Howard Lloyd, whom you'll remember as an ex-SOCRED MLA. I wonder if he's a little disenchanted now. And Bruce Ernst, a member of his association. They're going to be making their case that the little guy is being squeezed out. Can't get his woodlots, can't get what they used to call little public working circles, because of the fact that CAN4, Canadian Forest Products, one of the giants, is on the move to get 2 million acres of land as a tree farm license in the Chetwynd area. The big boys, including the union, are on the side of CAN4, and to talk on behalf of CAN4 this morning is Mr. Patterson, Glenn Patterson, who was the first regional professional forester resident in BC, and he also happens to be a vice president of CAN4. And after all that, thank goodness, we'll have a break with a very bright Englishman. Well, yes, I think he is. Called Hinton, who's coming up here, forgive the little giggle, is the new coach to rescue the Whitecaps. First, though, Carl Friedman after the break. Carl Friedman is the Ombudsman of British Columbia. When does your contract expire, just as a matter of interest?
It was a 6-year term of office, and it comes to an end in June 1985.
June 1985. The government has told you already that they're all in favour of fairness and justice and prepared to hire you again, have they?
No, as a matter of fact, I haven't heard those words from the government in a long time, I'm afraid. I would be very happy, you know, if the government stood up from time to time and said, yes, indeed, we are in favour of fairness and we are in favour of justice.
Well, let me say that on behalf of Premier Bennett. He is in favour of fairness and justice. Fairness and justice. But let's get back to this Shoal Island log problem, which I believe arose in a matter of log scaling for independent contractors between 1977 and
1978 and 1981.
What, was it Ian Mahood of Trier and Mahood who came to you in the first place with the complaint that his logs were being underscaled and that he was losing money?
That's correct. There was one, you've got to start with the fact that the big forestry companies hire out the cutting of the logs and the delivery to smaller logging companies, okay?
A portion of it.
Right. One of those smaller logging companies left its contract with BC Forest Products because it could not make any money, okay? And it didn't realize what the problem was. Trier and Mahood succeeded in that contract, and they had certain expectations as to how much money they would make based on their experience. They've been experienced loggers long in the business, and within the first 3 months, when they first got their first returns on what they would be paid, they realized there was a problem. That means from way back 1978, 79, they were onto the problem, but couldn't get a correction.
And the problem was that the log scaling by the government did not reflect the total amount of logs.
That's the basic problem. They bring a load of logs to Shoal Island, and then the job of the government scalers is to assess the volume of logs that has been delivered, and of course the kind of logs. And according to Trier Mahood and their own independent check scales, they did some checks and they had actuaries in there and all that. Something in the vicinity of 10 to 14% of logs were being missed. They were not scaled. Now that had two consequences. One was that their contract, the logging companies, smaller logging companies, got paid as a result of the government's assessment of how many, what volume of log had been harvested, okay? So the independent loggers didn't get paid, but there was a second consequence of this, namely that stumpage fees were not assessed on the logs that were missed in the scaling process. Now, the estimates vary, you know, whether it was 10 or 14%, some say 5 or 6. It was a bit difficult to assess what, but there are enough accurate records available to get an appropriate assessment. Now, there are two other problems that I should mention quickly, Jack. One is that the Forestry Act says every piece of timber harvested from provincial crown shall be scaled. That's under Part 6 of the Forestry Act. And the second thing is that if anyone affected by the scale has any doubts about the accuracy of the scale, they may ask for a check scale, a second scale, okay? And the way in which the scaling procedure was set up by the ministry, not by BC Forest Products, by the ministry in cooperation with BC Forest Products, was such that no one could ever do a check scale because the logs would be moved so fast that people could not question the scale because the scaling returns came in 3 months after the event. The logs were long gone, had been processed, moved elsewhere.
Let me get that clear. So therefore, the independent logger, in this case Trier and Mahood, suspected or knew that he was getting 10 to 14%, but at least 6% less than he should get.
Yes.
That's point number one.
Their argument is at least 10%, probably more.
Next thing, that meant ipso facto, quod erat demonstrandum, that the stumpage being collected by the government was again 6%, 10% or more short. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
How many millions of dollars, if you look at all the complaints you've had, and you've had complaints from a number of companies involving different big logging companies, and those companies are, who are they? Trier and Mahood,
Trier and Mahood,
Dugan Logging,
yeah, Kyaquat Logging.
Kaiquat Logging, John Reed and Associates, Cox and White and Davidson.
Right.
Right. Okay, in overall, therefore, how much could the government, the people of BC, have lost in underscaled logs in
Now,
this time of restraint and penury?
The estimates of my complainants, and I have fair amount of confidence in the accuracy, is that 226,000 cubic meters of timber were missed. That would amount, depending on the type of log you're talking about, of a minimum of 1.3, possibly $2 million of missed stumpage fees on the amount of volume brought in by the logging companies. In addition, at Shoal Island, BC Forest Products did its own logging, and some people estimated that 65% of the logs passing through Shoal Island were harvested by BC Forests. If you project that, then there could be somewhere between $4 and $6 million in uncollected stumpage fees for Shoal Island alone.
All right, now how can you as the Ombudsman, what kind of cooperation have you had from the Ministry of Forests?
I have had, reasonable cooperation. I've had access to all their files. They've refused to give me their legal opinion. They had a legal opinion saying that they couldn't use Section 87 of the Forestry Act to remedy the problem. But I made my recommendations that they should go back, they should talk to BC Forest Products, they should talk to the contractors, and then they should make an estimate, as they are entitled to do under Section 87 of the Forestry Act, of how many logs were unscaled.
You said quite clearly, I think, that it's been proven there was underscaling.
There's no question about it. The ministry themselves are fully aware of it.
Do they admit the underscaling?
They do, but they refuse to do anything about
All right,
it.
what about BC Forest Products, say? Take them particularly. If I'm getting logs and they've been underscaled, I, as a big logging company, make my own count. Have you seen their figures for these logs and these periods?
I have not seen them.
Why not?
And the ministry has been refused access to them, but the ministry has the power to get access to them. If they used their powers, they could have access. And the ministry never explained to me why they did not press their right of access.
Now, have you put this in front of the Cabinet?
I've put that in front of the Cabinet early in January. The ministry has been aware of my findings since September. I've made a preliminary report at the end of September. I made a final report in October. I got some extra outside legal opinions in November. And by December, I had a full and final report before the ministry.
I noticed the report of the ministry's internal investigation itself on page 15 of your tabled document. The legislature says there is direct evidence in the check period that logs were being missed.
There's no question about it. The ministry is aware of it. And I can't understand why they're not doing anything about it.
Why, therefore, what do Trier and Mahood do now? How do they get their legitimate pound of flesh?
Well, I think they did what they had to do normally. They went to BCFP, they went to the ministry. They've been in and out of ministry and ministers' doors since 1981. Finally, they decided in December 82 to come to me, and I let the ministry know that I've got the complaint.
They could sue if they wanted to, couldn't they?
They could, but they're on the brink, as a result of losing all this revenue, they're on the brink of bankruptcy. They haven't got the money any longer and the time.
You mean these little companies, generally speaking, are in trouble?
Several of my complainants are in financial trouble as a result of the shortfall of income on these logging contracts.
Well, that's a straightforward story. I shouldn't ask you this question. Had any MLA conducted an independent investigation, and did any MLA help you with his expertise, his knowledge, his background, and his government entree to get to the nub of this problem? Did anyone come to him and say, I'm an MLA, I can do the ombudsman's job, I'll help you?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mahood is a fairly active and vigorous individual. He did a lot of lobbying on behalf of his company, you know.
Got nowhere.
So far, he has had no better response.
The only person who helped Mahood there for and these other people was the ombudsman.
Well, I can only make a recommendation.
What right have you got to interfere in this business of these big companies, mister? Well, who the hell do you think you are?
I'm not interfering in the business of the company. My criticism is of the Forestry Ministry. BCFP, of course, will make the buck whichever way they see fit and whichever way they get away with under the law. I don't blame them, I don't question them, I don't criticize them. It's the ministry I have to
In
cooperate.
other words, the ministry has the power and the BCFP is willing to cooperate on the instructions of the ministry under its 87 of the Forest Act?
Well, the BC Forest said they're not willing to pay up unless a court orders them, so they've made it clear that they're going to fight this all the way. But, you know, they're entitled to use what legal rights they have under the law. I am quarreling with the ministry for failing to look after the public interest and doing the job they're supposed to be doing under the Forest Act.
And the cabinet, well, Waterland's leaving town again, I'm told, for another trip somewhere.
I don't know. Yes, I guess I've heard about that.
Well, maybe he'll take his cuddly bear with him. More, I'm going to talk to Ian Mahood and take calls on this from those interested after the break. Hey, just before I go to Ian Mahood, who's on the phone, I see in your report on page 16 that a member from the Assistant Deputy Minister admits that last year a serious scaling discrepancy was covered at Shoal Island. That's over at Duncan, isn't it? Crofton.
Yes.
Due to this and that, 10% plus of logs passing through the dry land sort were unscaled.
Accurate.
The government gave you that document.
Yes, I have the right of access to those documents.
They give you the files and you go through them, or do they?
Yes, absolutely. I go to the original file.
So we got to give the department credit for that much.
Yes, well, they have no choice under the law. They are obliged to give me access.
Oh, otherwise, can you take it if you don't get access to the department?
I have the right to subpoena any documents.
Ian Mahood of Trier and Mahood, how much money do you reckon you lost over the years on what is admitted, certainly in places, as underscaling of logs by the government log scalers? Ian? Are you there, Ian? You should be able to hear me when I ask the next question. Can you hear me now, Ian? Don't tell me. Can you try that again, please, Ron? We'll remake the call. There may be something wrong with this. Would you tell Ian on the line that we'll call you back in a minute, Ian. There's something wrong with this line, okay? Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Are you talking to me?
I am now, yes.
Okay, Mr. Webster, there's a couple more things I think you should know. I've been in the business of sorting logs and booming logs for over 15 years. One of the ways that the government scales logs in the smaller operations up and down this coast is the logs are bundled on the trucks and dumped in the water, and they only top scale them because it's inconvenient to have a scaler in certain operations all the time because of the cost of having a scaler there.
You're talking about a government log scaler?
That's right. Those top scales it's impossible for them to be accurate. The other problem that he's looking at with dry land sorting is a lot of the more experienced log scalers have now gone to private operations or contract scale outfits because there's more money for them, and the government scalers they now have are a lot of inexperienced people, and they miss a lot of wood in those dry land sorts.
Let me ask Carl about those aspects.
I believe under the law and the scaling regulations, the ministry may do sample scales, so it's conceivable that this is perfectly legal. I, of course, as a taxpayer, if I have to make up any money that isn't being collected, I'd be worried about the accuracy of the scale. I'd be concerned about the government collecting all the revenue that is due to the public purse. I have not had any complaints about this particular aspect.
Thanks very much. Are you there now, Ian?
Yes, I am.
I was asking you what you estimate on a reasonable basis that you, Trier and Mahood, may have lost because of underscaling of logs.
$515,000 in 1 year.
500.
Right out of the top of the company.
Now, did you attempt on your own before you went to the Ombudsman to get some rectification of what you regarded as a very unfair situation?
Oh, we had discussions with BCFP, and they treated us on the basis of whatever limited information was available at that time, but there was nothing official to deal with from the Forest Ministry because the Forest Ministry hadn't done its job. So whatever BCFP gave us a limited compensation, which was totally out of whack with reality, and Our losses, as I say, after that compensation is $514,000.
I see. And were you required to sign a waiver by which you could not take any future action against BCFP?
That's correct. Whatever claim we have is not against BCFP, it's against the ministry for its negligence.
In other words, you accepted what you regard as a much lesser settlement to get something.
That's correct.
And you maintain you're still $515,000 out of pocket on logs delivered to BC Forest Products.
That's correct.
They never did agree to that, did they? Admit the amount.
Well, they didn't know the amount, so...
Oh, to be fair to them, they just didn't know.
No.
Why wouldn't they know? Why are the logs only scaled at once?
Yes, they're only scaled at once, and they're in a hands-off position in reality. The scaling's supposed to be totally arm's length without interference from either buyer or seller, and the Forest Ministry is just like the guy in the butcher shop. He's got to have the right scales.
I get that point. I may have given the wrong impression about BCFP, which I take back now. In other words, it's an arm's length. They're stuck with the government scale, whether it benefits them or damages them.
That's correct.
It's a good point, that, Carol, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Did you find Friedman quite helpful on this?
Jack, I would say this, that if we did not have an ombudsman's office in the province of British Columbia, all small business would be squeezed and put out of business because of the insensitivity of the bureaucracies in both big government and big business. And I think the people of BC, based on my experience, and I've been almost 2.5 years fighting this case, the people of BC must support an ombudsman. They must strengthen it.
Thank you very much. Much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Friedman, if your contract is not renewed in 1985, will you be running for political office yourself in BC's next election? And will it be for the same people that you worked for all along, vis-a-vis the NDP DERA Group investigation into Little Mountain's electoral boundaries and heaping scorn on now 2 attorney generals, and now against Mr. Waterland in behalf of Mr. Skelly? I personally will hold in rebuke and contempt for any cabinet minister and government member who doesn't move to throw you out on your ear.
This is quite a mouthful you've given me there. The short answer is no, I will not run for political office. I've never run for political office, and I have no intention to run for political office ever.
Go ahead from Crofton.
Yes, I live here in Crofton and not too far from Shoal Island. And I understand they have government scalers there. I was just wondering how BCFP can get away with underscaling when the government scalers are...
No, we just explained that one, I think. BC scaling is done by log scalers in these operations and hands off, and win or lose, the company is stuck with a scale. This is a different case than that. This is a question of the ministry's proceedings not being properly done.
That's correct. The way the procedures were laid out, the scaling was subject to error, up or down. There was the possibility that logs could be counted twice. There was the possibility that logs could be missed, and a lot of logs could be missed.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
Good morning.
Morning.
I was just wondering here about these log scales here. Where I come from, they weigh all the logs, and the scales are very accurate now as compared to what they were before.
We don't weigh logs, do we?
No, they measure the length of the log, and they measure the diameter, I guess, at both ends.
Your report says that the scaling is too casual. Are you, in effect, criticizing the scalers themselves?
Well, there is an element of that. You see, throughout the process, when Trail Mahout became aware of the problem, they put in their own check scalers. And then the ministry was made aware of the fact that they are being checked. And the scalers made a very serious effort to be accurate, and they were still out by several percentage points, you see. So there's a question of the casual...
Is that proven?
Yes, there's reasonable proof of that. The ministry admitted that much themselves. There is the question of casualness on the one side, but the major problem to me is that the way the scaling process was set up, it was bound to lead to problems, you see.
I understand.
And the ministry has recognized that too. In 1981, they changed the scaling procedure, the way in which the logs were counted and scaled.
Oh, and it's perhaps better today.
It's changed definitely since 1981. You see, this is the problem. The ministry has admitted the problem, but what they failed to do is to find some corrective action for the underscaling that happened before 1981.
Understood. Last question. Has your budget been approved for next year yet?
No, it hasn't even been submitted to the Legislative Assembly.
I mean, you haven't submitted it.
I have submitted mine to Treasury Board as I must. It will come up on Monday in the...
So therefore we'll know on Monday what your budget will be for next year.
Yes.
My thanks to Carl Friedman, Ombudsman for BC. Next we're going to tackle another problem in the logging industry. Canfor's application for, I think it's 800,000 hectares up in the Chetwynd area, and the complaints, I think, a little bit bitter from the BC Independent Logging Association, who feel that the little guy is being squeezed out all over again. Thanks, Carl. After the break. In 1980, Canfor applied for a tree farm license in the Chetwynd area. Roughly speaking, it's 2 million acres with a fair amount of rock and whatnot, and among that. Here is Glenn Patterson, Vice President, Northern Operations of Canfor, Canadian Forest Products. He's going to sit and be quiet while I talk to Howard Lloyd, who's the President?
The chairman of the Forestry and Legislation Committee for the BC Independent Loggers Association, Jack.
Right. And here is Bruce Ernst, who is what?
A member of that association.
And you're a logger?
Yes, sir.
And a rancher?
Yes, sir.
Now, you're the guy, and I must use your quote, who objects to British Columbia being divided into feudal estates for the Bentleys, the Zimmermans, and other major licensees whose primary motivation is profit and control. Correct?
That's right, Jack.
You're a bit late in the day.
Well,
I remember when Vancouver Island was carved up like a piece of pie in the 50s, right?
That's right. Before that, they give away the CPR land grant in the island, give half the island, the land and the timber away. We've been kind of used to them taking the timber in the interior for the last 25 years, but when they start taking the land too, Jack, there's a lot of settlers and people are up there that are pretty disturbed about the situation.
All right, make your case for me. He's applied for this 800,000 hectare of tree farm license. What's wrong with it? The union supports it, the communities support it, you know, it means they'll get union companies in there, the IWA would move in.
Not necessarily, Jack.
Give me your complaints on your case.
Our biggest complaint, I guess, after the Pierce Commission, after the Forest Act came out, there was supposed to be a side for the big and the small in the province. That was the only reason I went along with any part of that act.
When you were a so-called MLA?
That's right, that's right. They give security of tender, they give 15-year forest licenses to the licensees, they give 25-year TFLs to the licensees. There was also supposed to be a program for the small people in the province, the farmers, the ranchers, the loggers, any interested citizen. That was the woodlot program. Plus there was the program for small business sales, average timber, average stand, average chance. Now these haven't had the emphasis or direction that they deserve, and yet we've gone into the forest licenses already. In 1982, the forest licenses were rolled over, no specific provision for contract logging in it. Now they're going on in and giving away the land base as well, and we say enough is enough, and we're going to fight this all the way.
Now we'll go to Bruce Ernst. I gather the complaint is that TFLs may be good enough in certain places, but in the interior, the Chetwynd area and around it, it does you right in the eye. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right, Jack. It's wrong to say that there is no provision made for access to the timber other than through the licensees, the 20 or 30 licensees. There is a provision made. It's called the Small Business Program. About 8% of the Small Business Program is held open to outright competition, just free market style of competition. Of the rest of the wood, of the rest of the 10% that's available to small business, 1.5% is available under a woodlot program, which is somewhat similar to a TFL license, but has not nearly the advantages of a TFL license. That's 1.5% in the province that's available for the people, societies, bands, corporations that do not presently hold a timber license in this province.
Now what would you like to happen to this 800,000 hectares? Is there any room for a TFL there at all?
I don't think there's any room for TFLs. The whole bulk of the TFLs, which we understand is 30 or 40 in the north of the province, under the present system. The priorities for putting them in place are wrong, the proportions are wrong in terms of their volume, and if I may refer to my notes,
sure, please.
The criteria are wrong. The criteria that they're using to allow these people to take out these licenses. They're using the same criteria they used 30 years ago on the coast.
You're saying this is the death of the little guy, the independent logger in this area if they get the license?
Well, I'm saying that they're completely neglecting the pioneers that opened that country. They're neglecting the people in the communities. That woodlot program, those small mini tree farms, that's the opportunity for everybody to share in the resource. You've heard all the talk in the last few days about the reforestation crisis. They've stolen the timber for 25 years with no competitive bidding. It's kind of funny, Jack. When there's trees standing on that land, they're the only ones that have a right to it. As soon as they're stripped off, then it's public land again. And we have to pay to put it back in again.
How many members do you have in your association?
I'd say there's about 800 across the province, give or take how many people are participating in any particular problem that we have.
I would, am I not right in remembering that any tree farm license must have a certain proportion of its timber harvested by independents or contract loggers?
That's one thing that Ian Mahood and the truck loggers group done years ago at the coast. They finally got a 30% clause in some of the contracts, and then it was increased to 50% with a specific percentage for contracting, a major contracting. Now they've watered it down. We had that same assurance from the Forest Ministry that these would be put into forest licenses and then later incorporated into the TFLs. These have been watered down to where the company can do their pleasure, all contract, all phase, any aspect of it that the company wants to do itself. They can take the loading out of it. They just
Have you got no contractual guarantee of work if a TFL moves in?
We've been told that they'll try to maintain the status quo as long as the present minister's there. The status quo isn't good enough. They've already picked out the phases of the operation they want to do. They're eliminating the contractors. It'll be the same as back east in a few years. It'll all be phased just at the company's pleasure. And this is Crown land they're getting with no competitive bidding. There's no other opportunity for contract loggers to get into the system.
They pay the stumpage, I presume.
They pay what stumpage? Last year they had 1.7 million housing starts in British Columbia. 3 years ago they had 1.8 million. And 3 years ago the Crown got $500 million out of it. Last year, for cutting all our timber in the province, the public of British Columbia owes the forest companies $80 million. Now, what stumpage is that? They pay no taxes, they pay no stumpage. I think rather than looking at new TFLs, they should be looking at the existing TFLs and the existing license holder, the existing forest licenses. I think these people are getting away with the worst rip-off on the back of the public. It's just a disgrace.
Except, I suppose, the argument is that they supply the jobs for the unionized guys and put up pulp mills and do this and that.
Maybe that's part of the problem with the system, Jack. There's this present crisis on the pulp mill and the pulp mill unions. That's ridiculous. If a couple of pulp mills had wildcatted, the government would have legislated them back to work. The government's taken the side of the big companies. They lock these people out without giving them a fair chance to bargain. They want to tie them into a 3-year contract. No, we've got too much of that confrontation. It'd be better to have it back in smaller units, the family units.
The threat of losing jobs is simply that. It's a threat to the public of BC. If you took the entire, if you looked at the forest resource in BC and treated it as a garden that needed weeding and thinning, I believe BC has a population of about 2 million, and if all those 2 million people were capable of going out and directly working on that forest resource, they couldn't provide it with the level of care that it requires and that it deserves. And these 20 major corporations can certainly not do the job any better than the Forest Service was able to do it in the past.
Okay, Glenn Batterson, I think, wants to concentrate on the Canfor Tree Farm license, so you'll give me a little spiel after the break, and then they'll have at you. Right. You're one of the Bentleys, the Zimmermans, and the feudal estate people after the break. This takes me back a long time to the 50s and the 60s and the carving up the pie on Vancouver Island and the fights by the little guys who strongly objected to the big boys controlling the whole industry. Now to Glenn Patterson, Vice President, Northern Operations of Canfor. Are you as bad as they make you out? You want to move in Canfor there, take over a couple of million acres, squeeze out the little guys and behave like the monsters are generally accused of behaving?
Let's get some facts on the table first. He talks about a big giveaway, Jack. There's no giveaway here at all. What we're getting is what we already have, cutting rates now that we earned through bidding, through purchase of quotas. He sold his quotas a couple of times, by the way. And what we're getting in this tree farm license application is an obligation and a responsibility to manage an area of land to back up our existing cutting rates, which is the right way to go. This is what Pierce recommended. He said it's the best form of tenure in British Columbia, if not in the world, by international comparisons. And the government is finally realizing that they're not doing the job of forestry, and they better let someone else do it who can.
Let me understand that. What do you have up in that area now before you get, if you get, your formal tree farm license?
We have 458,470 cubic meters of annual allowable cut or cutting rates under a present forest license system.
Under the forest license system?
That is right, which we've earned.
In other words, you have not got a TFL there at the moment?
No, no, we've applied for one because we think that's the best form of tenure to answer the problems of the 68,000 jobs you say are going to be lost. We'll get local registered foresters, and we've got 8 of them up there, out on the land doing the work instead of in the offices filling out government reports.
Right, just a minute though, but to buttress your 458,000, you get the balance of the acreage to give you a defined tree-farm license for which you hold total responsibility.
No, we're only applying for an area that would support those cutting rates that we have right now. Now, if we get a higher yield through intensive forestry, our own efforts, if we get a higher yield from that, then we will be able to get the credit under the tree farm license system for that increased yield. It's not cutting anyone else out, it's getting the reward for our efforts. We'll get that yield, and under the forest license system, we wouldn't get that.
And yes, you're on a forest license cutting rights at the moment.
That's right.
And you say that if you take the obligation of a tree farm license, you can support that for the term of the license.
That's right. We have to support it within that land area, or we'll lose it. And that's a big advantage of this system. It's putting the onus and the responsibility on the licensee to maintain those cutting rates. There's nowhere else to go.
All right. Have you got any logged over land, 40,000 acres or something right now, which has not been reforested?
There is 40,000 hectares of not satisfactorily stocked land within that tree farm license. That's not our responsibility. It's from previous past days. And we're proposing to restock that and therefore increase our annual allowable cut by 99,000 cubic meters. At least that's the minimum that we would promise to do.
Now, who's going to do the work, and who does the work up there now on your forest license arrangement?
We do the work, and we've done a good job. We've met all the government standards of reforestation.
But what about the independent loggers? What about who do you have what is called in Vancouver Island contract loggers? Sometimes self-loggers who have to accept your logging rates and your trucking rates as you arbitrarily decide.
Yes, I don't know what Mr. Lloyd's complaining about. Over 90%, nearly 100% of all our logging, our forestry work, our road building, development work is done by independent contractors who support our tree farm license incidentally, and incidentally, who are not members of Mr. Lloyd's association.
You say he's an upstart,
He's an intruder, outsider coming in and telling our contractors what they should have when they tell us what they want.
You've got your contractors there. Are your contractors unionized or non-union?
They're non-union, which is a custom in the interior.
Why does the IWA support your application? They want to be unionized the moment you expand your operations.
They have 750 employees, or I should say that includes some loggers. No, they have 400 employees roughly in our operations in the Peace Country, and they want to see those people continue with those jobs, and they see the tree farm license is the only way to guarantee that the job will be done.
2 other points with you. What about this woodlot concept that Bruce and Howard have been telling me about? That sounds like a good concept. Are you closing the door to the woodlot concept, the little guy's chance to get part of the 1.5%?
I agree with him as far as woodlots are concerned. I think it's great. I'd like to have one myself. And there is provision in the apportionment of the 5-year plan and of the timber supply areas to allow for woodlots. They haven't granted any, but there is room for them there. And I'd like to see them grant some. But they shouldn't come out of the tree farm license because they're a land base on their own, and you can't have one land base over another. But we are providing for the small business program within the tree farm license. We have agreed to provide for 13% small business, or whatever the ministry declares they want us to have.
What was this shot you took at Lloyd? You said that Lloyd has sold a couple of his quotas. Did he sell them to Canfor?
Well, his family at least sold the Alpierre division to our company for $3 million back in the late 60s, yes.
Not bad, eh?
It's not bad, except for the fact I sold out 3 years before that, Jack. I got 50 grand for my share, so I think I didn't do too good.
Yeah, but the fact is that you had a good piece of land which you sold to the big boys.
Well, I always thought there was 2 sets of rules in the forest industry in the province, but we found out there's only one.
The handwriting's been on the wall for a long time, Jack.
Canfor completely surrounded our sawmill site up there with a timber license. Wilson says that's not going to go. They went down to Victoria, and Wacky Bennett said it's going. So what are the boys going to do? They starved them out. There was only one set of rules, just for the little guys. There's no sets for the big guys. When Canfor first came in Prince George and the pulp mills, they weren't supposed to have a sawmill. They weren't there 2 years and they had sawmills. Some partners and I started a plywood plant a few years ago. We weren't supposed to have a sawmill. 3 years down the road, we had $2 million worth of small logs in the yard that we'd financed. None of the mills would buy them in the log trading concept. We said we're going to put a mill in. They said the first day you start a mill, you've lost your cut.
Who told you that?
The district forester in Prince George. Seems there's only one set of rules, Jack, just for the little guys. There's no rules for the big guys. They make their own. We're tired of it. We're tired of it.
I'd like to hear more about this concept of a woodlot. Are there any woodlots now in BC?
Yes, there are,
Which
Jack.
people farm, they harvest the logs as individuals?
Yes, sir. There are...
on a proper cutting yield basis, decided by the department?
As closely as it can be monitored, the things have been ignored for years. They're old. I know the Caribou District best, and of 2.3 million cubic meters that are available to cut in the Caribou Forest District, 34,500 cubic meters are available onto that 1.5% that I mentioned for woodlot programs. Then you have to subtract from that the 11 existing woodlots for 2,100 cubic meters. So you're getting down into a figure that...
Can a guy make a living in a woodlot?
The way it's presently structured, no. But it would be a great advantage to have one.
Well, you can have at each other now, and we'll take calls. If there are any calls on woodlots, TFLs, Canfor, Independent Loggers Association. You're not the truck loggers. You're separate and apart.
Truck loggers.
He said you're much less important.
For a long time.
You're much less important than the truck loggers.
I don't feel we are. We cover a lot more of the province and a lot more of the people.
Let me get after this. We didn't get a chance for me to get after him on Death of the Little Guy.
After the break. After the break. You wanted to go at these two people, Glenn.
Jack, I'm concerned about the statement of the death of the little guy. We have nearly 100% contracting, as I mentioned, and these people supported us at the tree farm license hearing. What he wants to do is have full phase contracting, full stump to dump, which will put out of business a lot of our operators now. Nearly 50% of them will be out of business. And then he can move in from Prince George. I suppose that's his angle. I don't know.
What do you mean,
I don't think we got any angles, Jack. When he says he speaks to people, we have people that asked us to present a petition there for a review of this whole business up there. They want to be able to work one small guy against the other. Do you know the forest industry is the most important industry in Canada? And do you know there's never been an honest-to-God contract in the forest industry since day one? No one has a 5-year contract. No one has a 2-year contract. You can't borrow money for equipment against a contract. You can't sell your contract. You can't use it for collateral. What's wrong with these guys? They're not even fair to them. Government always says we have a contract with a licensee. It's not our business. But the government gives them that timber rating with no competition. I say the government has a responsibility. The government can't be a little bit pregnant. If you're going to get up the top and give this type of a monopoly to these few feudal landlords here, the big brothers, then you've got to take care of the system all the way through.
Okay,
Jack, most of those contractors that we have been with us for 10, 15,
and they'll
even
stay
20,
one
even 20 years.
Forever.
Many of them are stump-to-dump contractors right now. 85%
How many
of them
do the development?
are...
Just a minute, let me get stump to dump. At the moment, you have different contractors for different phases of the operation, correct?
Right.
You have logging contractors, you have trucking contractors, and you have, what else? I don't know. Road building contractors.
Right, sure. Some of them do the whole thing, road building in the summertime and
None of them
logging
do
in the
road
winter.
building up in your area. The company does it all.
Oh, you're quite wrong on that.
Oh.
Where did you get those facts?
We got it right from your own members.
Well, at the hearing, and if you want to look at the transcript, we said that...
You held a hearing when all those fellows were working in the bush. They didn't even have a chance to come to the hearing. Why wasn't it held on a Friday or Saturday so some of those truckers and contractors could speak for themselves? If you're looking down over the gun barrel at a contractor and say, are you in favor of this? What do you expect them to say? That's the only employment opportunity he has in that area.
Okay, question. Do you ever give these contractors, can they get a firm contract from you, sell the contract, or borrow money on the contract for equipment?
Absolutely. We give the contractors the kind of a contract that they want. If they want 5 years, we'll give them a 5-year contract.
They don't like to
have a... Could I speak, please, Jai? They like to have a fairly short-term contract because they like to be free to move. They don't want to be married maybe to Canford for 5 years.
I thought these were the people that lived in the area, the farmers. Why wouldn't the farmers like to have a little woodlot too so they could supplement their income?
Well,
instead of just working on a single phase for your company forever.
You got to face it, Howard. The attitude in British Columbia, certainly in the big boys and the IWA, the big boys, is that they want to see the big money go in and put up the big operation.
Let's get back to this quote,
Jack,
this annual allowable cut. Can I just do this one here? This annual allowable cut that he says he's earned. Do you know, Jack, that the public of British Columbia has never received 5 cents for quota? It never received anything for third band wood. It never received anything for CU wood. Whether the Bentleys have grabbed up or gobbled up or squeezed out 100 small operators and say they paid for it, that's regardless of the public. They've never received a nickel for it, and they're not receiving a nickel for it today, Jack.
Listen, in good times we were getting $200 million a month or something on forest revenues.
Not since
Do you know
10,
the
15
figures
years
of
ago.
forest revenues to the provincial government?
Yeah, how much did they make this year, Mr.
1983,
Patterson?
I know that our company paid, in spite of the tough, you saw our losses probably reported yesterday,
Yeah,
of
they were
$44
in last
million,
year's budget.
and we still paid $9.6 million stumpage last year. That's what we paid in cash, despite those kind of losses.
Any calls on this? Let's try a call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'd like to know something. I hear everybody, all three of your guests are saying cut trees, cut trees, cut trees. I have yet to hear one of them address the issue about replanting trees. God knows you've got enough people off unemployment now.
Okay, hold on. I'm an expert in replanting trees at the moment, or the non-replanting of trees. Do you want to replant trees? Not on your back.
Certainly, I think the loggers, the contractors, the farmers, the general public should be in planting trees, the same as they are in Sweden. They go through the school system knowing what the forest is theirs. This is supposed to be crown land, crown forest. I think everybody should be in the business. The government priorities obviously aren't high enough on replanting, but the companies aren't paying enough money for that wood.
What are your responsibilities for reforestation in a TFL?
Well, they're for basic reforestation, which is a job we have done in the past. That is replacing all the areas that we've harvested in the past, and we've done a good job of that.
Just be
by
careful
government
now.
standards. We've kept it right up to date. And it gives us the opportunity to go in and reforest those backlog areas that were neglected in the pioneer days.
Jack, they never done a thing
this is
until
what we're
they got
offering to
public
do.
money for it. The only time they start reforesting is under Section 88. And that's another nice little apple for the forest industry. They do general contracting for the province of British Columbia. Do you know that? And that's closed tendering. Nobody else can get into the act. The forest
General contracting on replanting.
on replanting and building access roads. The public pays the roads in there, and they pay all the replanting. I'd like to know what the company's doing. Not a thing. Not a thing out of their own
Howard
pocket.
Lloyd knows perfectly well that the government, being the landlord, of course, is responsible for paying the costs of doing the regeneration. And the stumpage formula that they have, after we pay our stumpage, it does allow for deducting the costs of reforestation.
It's only public land when there's no
Go
trees.
ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you, sir.
Yeah, I have a slightly political question for these small businessmen. Don't they feel just a little bit stupid having support of the government for so long and then at the same time being shafted by government? Why in the
You
first place?
can bet your bottom dollar we do.
The only thing we can do now is admit that we're coming in a little late on the thing, but we're not, just because we've been ground into the dirt, we're not going to lay down and take a death blow
I think there's
under this present
another good
proposal,
point to
this
that, too.
final solution of TFLs.
There's
We're not
another
down
good
that
point on
far.
that, too. There's a lot of social credit supporters that work darn hard to get this government reelected. And if they think that the whole thing is going to be handed over to big business, if they think they're going to lose their home sites, their land, all their property management to big business, I think there's going to be quite a change in attitude out there in those social credit supporters.
You're
And we're going to
suggesting
take that message to
vote
them.
against social credit.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that the social credit party isn't running on its principles. Where's this concern for the small guy, the individual? Where's the grassroots open door policy? We've been trying to get a meeting with the Premier since last March.
And you're an ex-MLA.
An ex-MLA.
Go and talk to
I
you.
sat in the trenches over there with them boys. Through
What
all the
about
flag.
Waterland? Does he speak to you?
Waterland speaks to us anytime, but he says he
Doesn't tell
knows
you
he
anything.
knows our interests better than we do. We've only been in business for 30 years.
Well, what's wrong with Waterland? He hasn't protected you.
Well, I think he's been influenced quite a lot by his good friends in the Forest Council of Forest
You might have
Industries.
to vote against him in the next
They used to have a
election.
budget of a couple $1 million. When I was MLA, they had $6 million. Now the Council of Forest Industries has a budget of $14 million to help influence all
Go
the
ahead
decisions.
from Chetwynd.
Hello?
From Chetwynd, go ahead, please.
Yes, this is on, excuse me, on the small business sales.
Right?
The ones that they've had around Chetwynd, all, of course, now you have to realize that these are
bid. The woodlots are small business sales.
And they're bid,
And they're always up for bid. Now, everyone that's gone here has always brought 5 times the money that
That's right.
The upset price, say, the camphor pays or the other mills pay. Now,
hold on a second. I want to get a fact on this. How big is a woodlot, Bruce?
What he's talking about is a small business timber sale. It can vary in volume depending on the areas, anywhere from 150 loads, say, to 3,000.
No, but you don't get the land. You only get the harvest on it.
It's harvesting.
And they go for
strictly.
5 times
Easily.
the market value?
Easily.
some have been going about $4 to $5 an M3. And the small contractor, of course, he has to put up a $4,000 to $5,000 bond or site preparation, where camphor or the bigger mills, they don't have to put up anything.
That was never supposed to be part of the small business program, those deposits and those bonds.
The small business program, can it go ahead in your area despite the fact that you'll probably get the TFL?
Absolutely. The provision is made for it under the apportionment in the timber supply area for 13% small business.
The apportionment is too small.
They've cut it down unilaterally in their area.
Perhaps more heat than light this morning, but at least it's useful.
Jack, let me challenge you on this thing about the 68,000 jobs now. This is pretty important. This, you've been saying this, that in 10 years we're going to be out 68,000 jobs that you're quoting other people on.
Walters of the UBC Research Forest.
I'm saying that here we are offering to take on an obligation over a specific area to do what the government really hasn't been doing, and to do that job and reforest and get these forests back in shape again. It's an obligation we're asking to take on. No giveaways.
Jack, can I tell you one part of their presentation? The thinning of real thick stands, like after a fire, you know, the thinning of that and the pruning of that really results in beneficial growth. Their own application says, this is too labor intensive. This is too labor intensive. We're going to do this 15 years down the road. What's the biggest problem in British Columbia today? It's unemployment and welfare.
Jack, if there's to be a last word, this man has claimed a lot of support from a lot of different organizations, but does he seriously believe that the people of British Columbia will support a system of tenure whereby 90% of the wood is tied up by 20 or 30 major corporations and the rest of us are left to fight over the remaining 10%?
You want an answer for me?
Does he seriously believe that?
Nearly everyone in the Peace Country except these outsiders.
Outsiders.
Supported
I've
wanted our tree farm license application
outsider,
to go
Mr.
through.
Patterson. He was born in the Caribbean.
I'll give you an answer. I'll give you an answer to the question.
As
far as the public's concerned, if the big boys go ahead with big development, the people will support them for jobs.
They're making a big mistake.
They won't
Maybe.
Up there.
My thanks
They stole the timber for years, Jack. They're not going to get the land. They're not getting the land.
Howard Lloyd, Independent Loggers Association, Bruce Adams, same association, and Glenn Patterson of Canfor. I think that was a useful airing of quite heated views. Thank you, gentlemen. Next, we're going to have a giggle with a guy in soccer boots after the break.
I suppose the style of play will be different. And I think that at the end of the day, though, you have to win. And I think that the bottom line is winning.
Alan Inton. Is it an H in Inton?
Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't.
You see, the only people you can be racist about are the bleeding English. You know why? Because they're so superior you can't get through their thick skins.
Well, I think it all depends where you're from, you know. If you talk about the plum in the mouth and all that kind of stuff, I'm not one of those. I'm just your regular, ordinary working class.
Where from in England?
I'm from the Midlands, from a place called Wednesbury in Staffordshire.
Wednesbury.
Right.
Pronounced Wednesbury.
That's right.
They tell me you're eminently forgetful in your days. You are, of course, this is, of course, the new, dynamic, successful, winning coach of the Whitecaps who just left a team that bombed.
Well, I wasn't there when it bombed. I was there.
Oh.
I was there the season before it bombed.
And your record as a football player, I understand this is your life. Alan Hinton was eminently forgettable when you were with the Whitecaps.
Well, it's forgotten now because it was such a long time ago, but it was a lot of fun here. I mean, I did play here for 1 year in 1978, and I think that was the start of the club doing very well, and it was a lot of fun. The people here are great. They tell you the way it is, and that's the way I like to live my life.
What position did you play? I don't even know.
I was on the wing.
You were on the wing?
A left winger, a little bit overweight.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun with the fans, and I used to knock the balls into the centre, you know, for all these big tough guys to head them in the back of the net.
You're still a little bit overweight.
Let me tell you something. I've lost 24 pounds this year, believe it or not. So I was really overweight.
No, but the Whitecaps season last year was pretty yucky, wasn't it? They got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, didn't they?
Well, the big problem about North America, Jack, is, as you know, is that playoffs are what it's all about. And the regular season was good. They had a 24-6 record, which is great. But then in the playoffs, that's where the business takes place. And incidentally, my last game as a coach was in soccer ball. You know, I took the Sounders to soccer ball in 1982, and that was my last game. And then they wanted me out. New owners come in. Good night, Alan. Thank you very much. You're getting too much money. Out.
Yeah, you don't have no contracts as coaches.
Well, it's difficult. You know, I think that the coaches don't get a great deal of protection, to be honest with you.
You know, I'm amazed that the mass audiences haven't swarmed into the soccer. You get good audiences time to time, but there are some games. It's dreadful to watch a game on television where there's nobody in the stands.
That is bad. I agree with you. That doesn't look good for the game. The atmosphere that is needed. I mean, a great crowd, you know, is really worth a goal start. I mean, you know what it's like coming from Scotland. I mean, you told me yourself. You just told me you played in front of 15,000 people at Hammond Park.
For Glasgow secondary school boys.
Hey, and Scottish people and British people, when they're watching soccer, they make 3 times more noise than anybody else, don't they?
Yeah, but they're dreadful people. They're thugs.
I mean, I agree.
You and I each come from a long line of railway coach seat slashing drunken thugs who, when they go to Spain, 110 of the Celtics or the Rangers finish up in the Spanish jails.
Absolutely. I mean,
I'm glad we got away from that dreadful influence.
That's right. I mean, in England now they've got fences around the field and all that kind of stuff, and it's real sad.
Here they're gentlemanly people.
I agree with you.
Really are. You couldn't play a Canuck hockey game with the audience that close to them in Glasgow. They'd be over the wall.
They'd be on the field.
Bashing the players.
They'd be absolutely on the field. They'd try and break the plexiglass, wouldn't they?
Tell me, who owns the Whitecaps now? I've lost track. Is Capozzi still in it?
I think he's still involved. I think the majority owner is Bob Carter. They've got still a lot of the old ownership there, Wendy MacDonald, John Laxton, Gus Pans and 1 or 2 other people, but Bob Carter is the majority owner.
Good show. Who are your stars for it? When does the season start?
Well, we're currently winding up an indoor season, which I'm not coaching, and I'm trying to sort of evaluate the staff at the moment. Our season will start towards the end of April. We're doing okay. I'm evaluating the players. We've got some ordinary players, we've got some good players, and it's up to me to bring in 3 or 4 more other good players from around the league and maybe over in Britain and bring about a winner. Because this city wants a winner. If you don't win here, they get on your case.
Yeah, you got to go. I'm amazed that
That's
Harry Neale has not been chopped long ago. You know, they dumped Nielsen. But, I mean, my instinct as a Vancouver audience person is, if you lose, fire everybody.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I've come in this game. Coaches are hired to be fired. I don't resign.
No.
I say, I won't resign, you fire me.
That's
and then the people know where they stand.
You were the NASL Coach of the Year in 1980.
Sure.
But how many teams have you coached?
I was assistant coach here in 1978.
Right.
I then went to the Tulsa Roughnecks as head coach, my first head coaching job, and we did well in '79. We went to the playoffs. We won the first round of the playoffs, home and home against Minnesota. We then played New York, who hadn't been shut out for 52 games. We beat them 3-0 in little old Tulsa, 30,000 fans. Went back to New York in the semi-finals, 76,000 people then and got knocked out. I then went to Seattle, which is a big, big club, which isn't any longer. Obviously, they've gone out of business. But we had the best record in the North American Soccer League's history, which still stands today, which was 25-7. And I suppose on the strength of that, then I was voted the Coach of the Year.
You played in the Kingdom, didn't you?
Yep, sure. That's a great facility.
Will you ever play in... Oh, yeah, we had the one soccer game down here in the stadium, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But you got to get 50,000 people into that to make it feel good.
Well, I think the city of, the province of British Columbia should be very proud of that BC place. I mean, it's a
Keep your nose out of our politics.
Listen, you know what I like about you?
No.
You answer the question when people ask you the question. And you don't stand for these people who don't answer questions.
That's right.
You've got to get into the nitty-gritty of it.
These nice Nellies. The world is full of nice Nellies. Right. I'm not going to ask you who you're going to fire.
Ask me.
Who are you going to fire?
I won't tell you.
Who are you going to hire?
Well, we're going to hire good people. If we hire anybody, they'll all be good, quality, top-draw people that are leaders.
Yeah, up to the age of 30.
Well, maybe.
How old are you?
Mind your own business.
No, how old are you?
I'm 41.
Tell me, is that your own hair or a wig?
To tell you the truth, I think it's, it used to be blonde, but what's happened with me since I've been in coaching, people said to me once, don't worry about the colour of your hair, just worry about keeping it.
That's right.
So,
by the way, get your hair cut. Look at you.
Hey, my coach in England used to say that to me, Brian Clough, you see. Get your hair cut.
Yeah. Well, I won't talk about my brilliant career in soccer. Played against Stanley Matthews once.
What position did you play, Jack?
Right half. He was inside.
So you were fit, engine box?
I was fit, and he said, look, you take the ball off me once, he said, and no hacking. It was just an exhibition game. After the break, Alan Hinton, don't talk to me, talk to Hinton about the Whitecaps. You got to have an English accent to play soccer, or a Scotch one.
Well,
after the break. How much are the tickets to soccer now?
I think that, you know, they're $10 and down, I think. You know, to be honest, Jack, I've only been here just over a week. And
how about the name Tino? Are you aware of the name Tino Literi?
Sure, I'm aware of him.
Is he going to be with the team next year?
I can't tell you that. You know, I think I'd like it resolved within about a week.
He's a good player.
I think he's a good goalkeeper.
Go ahead to the old fox, Hinton.
Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
I'd just like to know, we've lost, it seems, Dave Watson, who I think was the finest defender the Whitecaps had last year. So what position is Franz Tyson in this year?
Well, what's happening at the moment, you know, I'm evaluating the whole of the team department, and, you know, I think by about next Wednesday I will have completed my theories on what's going on, and I think that then Colin Fleming and I will probably go to England and resolve the Franz Tyson situation. It's a little bit complex. We will get in the middle of it, and it is possible Franz will be back. So there's not been a firm decision made on Franz Tyson. I think primarily if he does come back, then he's going to have to want to play for this club. If he doesn't want to play for this club, then we don't really want him anyway. But Dave Watson, who's been a great player, you know, it's my understanding he will not be back.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. I was wondering about, does Mr. Hinton support the pay cut that the league has asked all the players to take?
Well, quite frankly, I don't know too much about that. I think that there's so many rumors go around about this, that, and everything else that, you know, I'm not in a position to give you any ideas.
Well, it's obviously a normal economic pressure when something like the Sounders goes down the tube, and they haven't been replaced in the league, have they?
Not at all, no, no.
Obviously there's economic pressure.
Well, I think, you know, you've got to win. Everybody has to win. And I think winning is the team winning, the fans winning, the owners winning by not doing their brains in. And I think that good, sound policy decisions to keep the game afloat are necessary. You know, I'm in the middle of all the players' contracts at the moment.
Good.
And, we've got to be fair.
And the old fox is also in favour of motherhood, decency, right, truth and justice. You're just another bleeding politician.
Well, I'm not
You're
really.
Smooth. You're smooth. Did you go to Eton or Arrow?
No, I went to St. Bartholomew's, which has now been knocked down as well.
Yeah, better knock down. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Is it me?
It's you.
Oh, good morning. Hello, Alan. I've
Hello.
spoke to you before, previously. Just two questions for you, sir. Is there any news on Alan Taylor coming back in? And also, now that you're in the position, could you get us a good goalkeeper without a bird, please? Hang up and listen.
Jack, all your people that's calling in putting me on the spot here, and of course you're helping them as well. But the goalkeeping position, as we've just talked about, is in limbo. A decision will be made next week.
What about the bird?
I think the bird is flying around and twisting in the wind, as far as I know. I mean, it's out of work, I think.
So is the goalkeeper for the moment.
Alan Taylor's situation is that, you know, I don't know who he's playing for at the moment. I couldn't tell you he'll be back. The chances are he won't be back. But if I can get a better player than, you know, if I need an Alan Taylor, I know where they are, obviously.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I wonder if you could tell me when the local talent is going to be used a little more. I really believe that this is why a lot of the fans aren't coming out to watch the Whitecaps.
Well, you know, to be fair, I mean, they're not coming out to watch the indoor program as much as we would like, but this club last year averaged 29,000 for outdoor games. I know it's in BC Place at Empire Stadium and all that, but 29,000 is a lot of people to average. The local players are very good, and they're improving as each year goes by, and it's my feeling that I'm going to get involved very much in the development of the local players.
Is there a quota for local players like in Canadian football?
I think what's going to happen, Jack, they are negotiating now with the union whether we will play 5 North Americans next year, and if that happens, then I'd welcome it with open arms, because this is Canada. We need to encourage Canadian players, and there's good Canadian players, and you know, I hope Canada can qualify for the World Cup and do well in the Olympics, and that's great for soccer. Soccer's going to win big.
Kamloops, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the lady previously here robbed most of my question. I was going to ask about more Canadian, more Canadian input into the game. Kamloops, as you know, as well as Prince George and Vancouver, has got very, very good local soccer leagues, and we've yet to see any good scouting staff of our senior men leagues. How can us as BC residents or Canadian citizens get a little bit more chance?
I've got the question. Do you scout Prince George and Kamloops?
I think occasionally that's taken place. You know, my priority at the moment, Jack, is to make sure I get a grip of all the players, get them with the right discipline, get them with the right attitude, get them involved in the community. We will have a great scouting system once I get on top of the job, I'll guarantee you that.
One, Prince George. Prince George. Not there. Go somewhere else. No, I'll take one more. Go ahead, please.
Yes, what about Peter Beardsley? Like, he was possibly the greatest Vancouver player the Whitecaps have ever had, and it just doesn't look like he's going to be back, does it? I'll hang up, thanks.
Well, at this moment in time, he will not be back. He's playing with Kevin Keegan in England for the Newcastle United. That's not far from Scotland, Jack, you know. He won't be back. It's, from my point of view, we're going to miss him. He's a very, very good player, and it's people like Peter Beardsley that I've got to replace. And by replacing him with good players, then we can look forward to a winning season. But losing Peter Beardsley and a few other players is going to be my major problem.
What he has to do, and I want to ask him, is bring back Willie Johnson after the break. Number of short calls to Hinton. Either encourage him or discourage him, but do it succinctly. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yes.
Yeah, Jack, I'm disappointed in you and Alan and the man you have sit beside you. You always feel you have to run down the Scottish and English soccer fans.
Why? Nobody ran them down.
You are calling a bunch of thugs.
I was talking of my day when there were thugs and 300 police in the infield at Hampden Park with reserves underneath the stand. We are not the nicest soccer fans in the world if we go back to our roots, and I don't care what you say.
Oh, well, I'm just very disappointed hearing that out of you this morning.
Oh, come off it. You've been... matter of fact, I became an atheist because I was not allowed to...
You're trying to let me, Jack Webster.
I don't... Forgive me, love.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Keep the heat, Belle.
I will. And
Okay.
back to you two.
You didn't understand a word we said.
I've never seen that done before. And I've watched television all over the world. I've never seen that done before.
There's many a thing happens here that isn't done anywhere else.
Right.
Oh, wrong one. Go ahead to Mr. Hinton. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Jack.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alan.
First of all, I think you're...
Good morning, caller.
I think you're going to turn out to be a good coach. I'm a big fan of yours. But 2 questions. What are you going to do now that Eddie Coker is gone? Are we going to be looking for another forward now, or what's going to be happening with...
Well, let me tell you about...
attacking system are you going to use, not just down the wings and knock it into the center again?
Well, I think, you know, quite honestly, I'm going to go for a lot more speed. You know, I think we've got to play a running type of game in BC players. David Cross, and possibly another player who will also be very fast. So 80 for me was on a good contract, and he really wanted to get back to San Diego, so, you know, we didn't stand in his way.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hello, Alan.
Hi.
Yeah, I just want to make a little comment about the indoor soccer and, you know, all the fanfare and fireworks and Star Wars music, and I just hope that that kind of thing isn't going to carry itself over into the regular season. You know, I hope the Whitecaps and the North American Soccer League as a whole realize that what the fans want to see is a class organization, something like Liverpool or Glasgow Rangers, that type of deal.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do, you know, to create. We'll stand or fall on our results on the field, and I know that's what the Whitecaps fans want. We want good, attractive soccer. We want good winning teams, characters on the field, leaders on the field, which we're a little bit short of at the moment. Don't worry about all that I was going to say bullshit, but I won't say that on the air. We don't want that garbage. We want good, honest, wonderful, attractive soccer, and we'll do very well. And we need your support, and please help us to continue to be a good club.
Are you bringing out any big British teams this season?
I think there's a possibility that Glasgow Rangers might be out, and maybe, I think Colin Fleming's trying to get Liverpool.
Matter of fact, if Glasgow Rangers come out, I'll call it. It'll be the first decent called soccer game in many a long year.
Hey, Jack, you'd look nice in your black referee's uniform.
Oh, I'd be a
I'll tell
good
you something,
referee.
if you're a referee, I'll be the linesman.
Good, we're on. My thanks to Alan Hilton. Best of luck as coach of the Whitecaps. Who knows, we might make it the Soccer Bowl again after the break. Reserves underneath the stand. We are not the nicest soccer fans in the world if we go back to our roots, and I don't care what you say.
Oh, but I'm just very disappointed hearing that out of you this morning.
Oh, come off it. We're going to do an adult play on the government slashes and staff and facilities with Cliff Anstine of the BCGEU Monday morning, plus anything else that's hot over the weekend. I'll be back Monday, 9 a.m. precisely. I'm an expert on ethical principles, and I shouldn't really have you on at all this morning. Go ahead, please.
Media manipulator.
Media monster, I call them. Media monster.
I think he is a leech on society.
A leech on society.
Oh.
Keep going. You can't shepherd wolves.
It wasn't to be taken
Come here,
literally.
nice wolf, nice wolf, nice wolf. We'll protect you from Elliot. Come here, come here. What happened to Bo Derek?
Well, they're members of our organization,
She
but
didn't come up.
She wasn't supposed to.
What about Bridget Bardot?
I never promised her.
What about George C. Scott?
Never promised them.
But that's why we were up there. We wanted to see Bo naked in the snow. And it's all our fault.
It's your fault.
It's not your fault.
Nope.
You haven't spoken out enough, not often enough to the ordinary people of BC.
That's right. I think we need Bo Derek in the woods.